You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network, on the landofisrael.com, where the election in Israel is getting closer. There was some strange hope for about 12 hours or so that maybe, just maybe, our election was going to be canceled. 85 days before the election, that maybe the Knesset members would realize that they had made a terrible mistake, that no one really wanted an election anyway, the election wouldn't change anything, and maybe the people of Israel want there to be a national unity government of the two largest parties that they gave 70 out of the 120 Knesset seats to. And so there was this process of looking into it that got leaked to the nightly news here that put everyone into a frenzy. I was in the middle of covering a convention of the Labor Party at the time, where it was kind of a sleepy kind of event with not a very big turnout, where people weren't very excited about what was going on at the event, and people started talking about what they were getting pushes from the nightly news onto their phone, and thinking, maybe this whole event where we're electing a new leader of the Labor Party, maybe it's all a waste of time, because maybe we're just going to keep the Knesset as it was. But sure enough, it turned out that this was just a conversation in the hallway between a Knesset member from Likud and a Knesset member from Blue and White, that they decided to look into legally whether it could be done. Legally, it can't be done, apparently. Unlike other bills that could be just voided, the bill that initiated the Knesset dispersing really did disperse the Knesset. So, unfortunately, here I'm giving an opinion, unfortunately, we are stuck going to a second election on the 17th of September. Now, what I want to focus on in the first part of this program is one of the keys to defeating Netanyahu. Over the last couple of shows, we've talked about Netanyahu's weaknesses a little bit. That could make the election more exciting or more interesting, obviously, without giving any opinion on who should win. But today's show, I really want to get into the competition to Netanyahu, because, Donald Trump said during the campaign when he ran that he could murder someone on Fifth Avenue and people would still vote for him. And that might still be the case for Netanyahu as well, especially if there is no serious alternative. And that's where Benny Gantz comes in. I remember speaking 2-3 years ago to a Knesset member at the time who is a neighbor of Benny Gantz. And we were talking politics about what was going to happen in the years ahead. And I start talking about Benny Gantz, about how he's going to be the candidate for Prime Minister, and the entire center left is going to rally around him. And the Knesset member who is his neighbor and knew him well and said, no way, not going to happen. Really, why? The guy's a former chief of staff of the IDF. He has charisma. He's really tall. He has those powerful blue eyes. Why not? And the guy said, well, but you got to look down from the blue eyes. And get to the middle of that very tall, lanky figure, and notice that he has no elbows. No elbows? Yeah. Politicians need elbows in Israel. And he will not be able to fight for anything. He is non-confrontational. He's someone who's gotten all of the promotions in his military career because they fell into his lap after other people fought and tarnished themselves, including the job of Chief of Staff of the IDF itself. If Benny Gantz doesn't have it, then Netanyahu could win the election more easily than people think. So let's go to yesterday. On Monday, I covered a meeting of the blue and white faction in the Knesset that they held ahead of a parliamentary session, a special session called during the Knesset's dispersal, to discuss budget cuts that were taking place at the same time in the Prime Minister's office because the economy is not doing as well as people thought before. And in part because of the spending on this election, they had to cut the budget. And so Benny Gantz had this ripe opportunity to really speak to the people of Israel about the problem that there is with Netanyahu and his government. And he really failed. Either he wrote or somebody wrote for him very nice words about how the election's unnecessary and how Netanyahu is wasting the taxpayer money, and maybe that could resonate with people. But not if you make a very big gaffe. So he's in the middle of speaking, and he all of a sudden says, the people of Israel are stupid. What? Then he corrects himself right away and says, not stupid. The Hebrew words, Hatzibur metumtam, lo metumtam. Oh no, you can't get away with that. That's not the kind of mistake any politician can get away with making in any country. Let's play the tape so you could hear it for yourself, because I couldn't believe it when I heard it.
Bibi, הציבור לא מטומטם.
Because of that tape, ladies and gentlemen, that's what people heard from what Benny Gantz said. Not all the legitimate criticism of the government that he wants to replace. Not anything about how blue and white is going to stay unified despite reports about them fighting. Only the public is stupid. And perhaps not stupid enough if you want to win an election when you say things like that. And it just shows the inexperience of Benny Gantz as a candidate against Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been in politics now since the late 1980s. He's never done anything that stupid. You can't catch him. Obviously, most of the reporters don't like him very much, and he doesn't like them very much. They are out to get him, and he is out to get them. Any little mistake would be totally highlighted. The number 2 in blue and white, Yair Lapid, tweeted something about Israel being a state of all of its citizens. His point was something about rights for gays and lesbians, but a state of all of its citizens is interpreted by Israelis to mean not being a Jewish state anymore, and having the Islamic religion have just as much rights as the Jewish religion, and things that are controversial here. It means the opposite of being a Jewish state. It means only being a democracy. And he started getting criticized for saying this, Lapid, and then he went on Twitter and admitted, my wording was wrong. This is what happens when you tweet between getting out of the shower and drying yourself. He actually admitted that that's what he does. He thinks about something in the shower and tweets before he is even dry, ladies and gentlemen. If this is the competition to Netanyahu, he could be prime minister for life. Remember, he's only 69 and his father died at 102. And one more statement from Benny Gantz. We don't have a video of this because it happened during the question-answer session after the speech, and as parties tend to do, they tend to put online only what their politician said, not how he answered the questions of the press afterward, and I have not actually been able to find a tape of the question-answer part that I witnessed. There was a question about whether an Arab party could join a coalition. And in the previous election, just 2 months ago, blue and white ruled out an Arab party joining a coalition led by them. Here Benny Gantz said, actually, I'd be fine with them joining a coalition, which is an 180-degree turn, which is a problem, but not the biggest problem in what he said. Then he starts speaking empathetically about the Arab sector and what they're going through, which is beautiful. True, the Arab sector does suffer, as do other sectors in Israel. They are more poor than other sectors. They do have more violence than other sectors internally amongst themselves. And that's when he started making a mistake. He compared the crime and the murders that there are in the Arab sector to Chicago and Detroit. I'm sitting there in the crowd about 10 feet away from him. Me, the proud native Chicagoan. And I'm listening to the candidate for Prime Minister insult the people of Chicago and Detroit. And I'm thinking, okay, there are a lot of murders in Chicago and there are a lot of murders in Detroit, but there are different ways of saying it. You could say statistically the numbers are getting closer, and you could find a way to say it without being insulting of Chicago and Detroit. But he really said it in such a way as if Chicago and Detroit are these terrible places, and we don't want the Arabs to be like them. This is a problem in both directions where you're comparing. I don't think Chicago want to be compared to the Arabs in Israel. I don't think the Arabs in Israel want to be compared to the inner cities in Detroit. This is just not what you do. This is where you have an advisor say, don't say that. He doesn't have such a thing right now. And this just leaves open the possibility that later on he's going to say even more problematic things. And Yair Lapid will say problematic things. And Moshe Ya'alon, who's I think the smartest of the leaders of Blue and White, really cerebral guy, who is number 3 on the list. He also, because he gets emotional when he believes in something strongly, could say something that he'd regret too. If there are 84 days between now and September 17th, and the election is not going to be canceled, and there won't be a last-minute national unity government formed between Likud and Blue and White, then it could very well be that it won't be because of any facts on the ground changing, of Avigdor Lieberman no longer being willing to work with Netanyahu, of the economy being less good than it was a few months ago, or Israelis holding accountable Netanyahu for campaign promises that he made last time and then broke. It could be that Netanyahu's victory could happen, not because of anything about him at all, but just because the alternative to him proves incompetent. Stay with us after the break. Speaking of incompetent, we're going to be talking about the Labor Party.
On a very special edition of Israel Uncensored with Josh Haston, the New England Patriots arrive in Israel. Hear exclusive interviews from Julian Edelman, Drew Bledsoe, Ty Law, and more.
What does it mean for you to be in Israel?
It means a lot. I mean, to come to the Holy Land and actually see American football.
It's pretty heartwarming to come out here and have all the Israeli fans screaming your name.
It's such an amazing combination of brand new and very old, and the soulful and the spirituality here.
For more coverage of the Touchdown in Israel event in Jerusalem, listen to Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.
And we're back here on Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com, where we are in the middle of an exciting Israeli election. We are only 84 days away from when the people of Israel will have a day off to relax and go to the beach, and I will work my tushy off. And I've already started working that tushy off because there is an election taking place as we speak for leader of the Labor Party. That is the only one of two parties that will be having a contest for the leadership of a party ahead of the election, the other one being Meretz, which my colleague Jeremy Sharon will be covering on Thursday. The election for leader of the party of that formed the country, Labor, will be happening on July 2nd, which is already next Tuesday. And right now, as we speak, it being Tuesday, there is a mad frenzy going on because deadlines are happening today. I'm taping this at 8:30 in the morning Israel time. 4 p.m. is the last chance to join the labor leadership race. Producer sitting next to me, join the labor leadership race. Anything can happen. People listening, I'm thinking this is going to be online like a couple hours before, join the labor leadership race. Anything can happen. They'd elect anyone. They picked Avi Gabay, someone extremely uncharismatic, who had very little to sell to the people of Israel. And if he can get elected, anyone and their cousin could be elected. Right now, the candidates are Itzik Shmuley, Amir Peretz, and Stav Shafir. Amir Peretz is the most well-known of the three, being a former defense minister, a former candidate for prime minister and leader of the Labor Party himself, with a trademark mustache. He's remembered negatively because of the binoculars that he looked through with the ends of it closed. And bad picture to be taken for any politician. But he's also remembered very fondly for the Iron Dome anti-missile defense system that he advanced as Minister of Defense, which protects his own house in Sderot in the Gaza periphery. Amir Peretz is now over 70, is a veteran leader. He first got elected to the Knesset back in the 1980s. And he's the longest-serving Knesset member that we have right now. That this would be labor going in a way backward to a leader that it had before and to a previous generation. Whereas the other two candidates, Stav Shafir and Itzik Shmuley, are the younger generation. They're in their 30s. Itzik Shmuley is 39. Stav Shafir is 34. They are the leaders of the 2011 socioeconomic protests that rallied people around the country to go out in the streets and protest the cost of living being way too high, especially the apartments in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And they made a name for themselves that way and used it to enter politics and labor. Now, they did fight amongst themselves a lot back then when they led those protests. And even as they went in the same direction, into politics and into the same party, they did not speak. Stav Shafir and Itzik Shmuley told me a couple days ago, he said, I didn't speak to Stav for 8 years. That's a very serious conflict, ladies and gentlemen. I've seen a lot of conflicts in Israel, where people insult each other and everything, but 8 years, wow. So this is going on right now, this election. The labor convention was 2 days ago. Shmuley said, Stav, drop out of the race. You can't win. It's between me and Amir Peretz. We can join together. And Stav said, Shmuley told me something else when we met a month ago. We talked about him joining me and me being the candidate to run. And so now they're fighting over what happened behind closed doors the one time that they did meet over the last 8 years. This could clear the way for Amir Peretz to win. And the way it's looking is that no matter who of the three will win, they will join labor together with some other conglomeration of parties on the left that will be formed ahead of the August 1st deadline to submit lists for candidates to the Knesset. Itzik Shmuley, who is very popular in the Labor Party and very respected among the people of Israel for someone who fights socioeconomic battles successfully and has passed a lot of legislation helping poor people, chances are he would agree to make way, and it really gave this impression when I spoke to him, for Ehud Barak, the former prime minister, to be the candidate of the left. Now, Barak himself is not popular among the people of Israel. There's a lot of bitterness toward him that he wasn't exactly a good prime minister. I think Sarah Netanyahu might be the only person less popular than Ehud Barak today. But Barak, much more than Itzik Shmuley, is a very, very powerful speaker. Very, very critical of Netanyahu. Knows how to express the opposition to Netanyahu, even if he is the shortest serving prime minister in Israel's history, and who was blamed for taking Israel out of Lebanon haphazardly, and for being someone who makes decisions off the cuff in a way that ends up being regretted later on, and apparently also tried to get in the way too much of Israel destroying the nuclear reactor in Syria. Despite all that, look, if you're looking for someone who could really cause a dent in Netanyahu's armor, Ehud Barak, who's the only person who's ever beaten Netanyahu in an election, could be the guy to do it. Now, that wouldn't mean that he would become the prime minister, but he could hurt Netanyahu enough potentially that could make the Blue and White Party be able to form a government if they don't keep on screwing up. So 4 p.m. today, deadline to join the Labor leadership race, but you can then join Barak's party if you don't end up joining the Labor leadership race. Midnight Tuesday night, between Tuesday and Wednesday, is the last time to join the Labor Party in order to be able to vote in the Labor leadership race next Tuesday. It's very rare that you have this one-day kind of membership drive. So all the candidates are frantically trying to sign up as many people as they can today. I encourage my listeners and my readers in the Jerusalem Post to be involved in Israel's democratic process. If you are a citizen of the state of Israel living here, I don't tell people what party to join, but I do want people to be involved civically. And so if your views are anywhere near the views of the Labor Party, you have a chance today to affect the democratic process by becoming a member of the party or by joining the race, and getting to decide who will be the 9th leader of the Labor Party since Ehud Barak lost his re-election campaign for Prime Minister in 2001. This is the 9th election for leader of the Labor Party that I have covered since then. That's what I do, ladies and gentlemen. That's my job at the Jerusalem Post, is that every year and a half or two, I go and I cover an election for leader of the Labor Party, which just shows how messed up the party that has formed the state has become. But we haven't seen the last of them. Even though people in Israel have understandably moved to the right over time, I don't believe those who have eulogized the Labor Party and said that it's dead. The right kind of leadership can resuscitate the party. Whether Amir Peretz, Itzik Shmuli, or Stav Shafir is that right kind of leadership remains to be seen. One credit for Stav, she knows how to speak English beautifully, explaining the opinion of the Israeli Zionist progressive left in America and England, around the world, extremely well, explaining why the effort to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel is illegitimate and very, very unprogressive, as she said when I interviewed her a couple weeks ago. Whether that eloquence that she has in English translates into being strong enough a leader to be able to pose any political challenge here in Israel remains to be seen, and looking quite unlikely right now. But anything can happen in Israeli politics. That leaves us with the election for leader of Meretz, which is also very interesting. Tamar Zandberg was the leader of the party in the April election. She won only 4 seats. She might not have even crossed the electoral threshold if it weren't for the votes of some 200,000 Arabs who were upset with their own Arab parties and decided to empower Isawi Frej, who is number 4 on the Meretz list, and an Arab from northern Israel. She's being challenged by a guy named Nitzan Horowitz, who is a former journalist, who ran for mayor of Tel Aviv and was briefly a Knesset member for Meretz. He is gay, and he is charismatic, and he is someone who wants to focus more on matters of religion and state and less on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that's right. You could easily have a leader of Meretz already on Thursday, the leader of the most left-wing Zionist party, who admits the Palestinian issue isn't something that he cares about a lot. If that's true of the most left-wing Zionist party, then that issue will clearly not be a big issue ahead of the election on September 17th. If Stav does not win the leadership of the Labor Party, and if Tamar Zandberg is defeated by Nitzan Horowitz, and if Tzipi Livni does not make a political comeback, which is not looking very likely right now, and if Ayelet Shaked is not given the top slot in a party that runs in the September 17th election, for the first time in a long time, there will be no party in Israel led by a woman. Let's just put a guess on it. Stav won't win. Tamar Zandberg's pretty 50-50 right now. I think Ayelet will end up leading a party right now. There is a WhatsApp group called Sayeret Shaked, meaning the forces of Ayelet Shaked, where she's been giving them hints on things going on behind the scenes. We don't know yet what they are. Maybe by next Tuesday's show there will be, and maybe she will be the only woman running at the head of a list in the September 17th election. So that's all the excitement taking place behind the scenes as we speak inside Israel today. Thank you for being with us, and we'll be back here next week with more excitement from Israeli politics from here in Jerusalem. Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com, broadcasting the truth and beauty of Israel to the